Mr. Topher Field!
Joining me now is that inspiring and brave Australian documentary filmmaker, Topher Field.
Melbourne, my home. What unfolded here shocked the world and caused many to wonder what happened to Australia. In the middle of it all were ordinary people, people like us. My name is Topher Field. I'm the director of Battleground Melbourne.
Topher is on a mission to empower people.
The only thing that limits government power is the limit of our obedience.
But we realized a deeper truth, that good people break bad laws.
Moral cowardice is the great scourge of our time.
We're here to take back the freedoms that were earned for us by the people that we built this shrine to remember.
This was a military checkpoint. They had the army on these checkpoints. And without irony, saying, papers, please. Our boys in blue wouldn't obey a government tyranny. Excuse me, they will.
Yes.
I understood that my arrest was coming, and I by then I was on the verge of a breakdown.
Hi everyone, Rukshan here, and quick video to alert you to the arrest of Topher Field.
The problem with Australians is not that so many of them are descended from convicts, but that so many are descended from prison officers.
I went as far on one occasion as to saying, yeah, you're absolutely right, I'm inciting. I'm inciting people to exercise their human rights.
And I will accept nothing less than freedom. Freedom for me, freedom for my children, and freedom for us all.
Well, hello and welcome to another Topher Field podcast. Thank you to everyone that's already jumped in with your comments. Laurie saying this is perfect timing, was discussing how to conduct oneself just yesterday. Thanks, Topher. Well, thank you for your comment. Thank you for joining us, Laurie. Tim saying g'day. Stu saying g'day to Tim. But, you know, I'm sure g'day to me as well. I'm just going to assume that that was also directed at me. Thanks for joining us, Stu. Viv, love your braveness. Well, thank you, Viv. That's very kind. Daniel Hutchison reminding us of Luke 8:32. You shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. A very good thing to keep in mind. Claire, welcome. Good to see you. And Private Pile, thank you so much for joining us as well. And keep those comments coming. Tell me where you're watching from. Let me know where you are. Chris is saying, good to see you. Good to see you too. Catherine saying that I look happier. I got to say, the last week and a half now has been really, really good. I believe I have found a combination of supplements that are really, really working for me. I've been supplementing heavily now for 8 weeks. And a week and a half ago, Monday last week, I made one change, and it's made a world of difference. I will talk publicly about that in another couple of weeks once I'm sure that change is sustained, that it's not just a short-term thing. But you're absolutely right, Catherine. I am happier. I'm feeling great. I am in a much better place now than I've been in a very, very long time. And part of that's been the work that I've been doing and the counseling and everything else. But also I think I may have discovered something quite important on the nutrition side of things. Ross, thank you for joining us. Yes, that's right. Lisa, hello and thank you. You know why. Wonderful to see you. Very much appreciate your support. Not enough for a wake, says Sammy. Yeah, I disagree. Not as many as we would like, but I think we don't need as many as we think. What we need is more people to have courage, which is one of the reasons why I'm talking about that tonight. We need people to understand the moment in history in which they live. We need people to understand what their own values are, what their identity is. I'll talk about that tonight. All right, so keep the comments coming in. They're pouring in thick and fast. Really appreciate that. I literally can't keep up with the speed at which these comments are coming in. Ross, though, is correct. 3% is roughly the number. 3% of people is all you need if you have 3% of people who are willing to pay a price. They are willing to be active and pay a price. 3% is all you need. What that means in practice is you probably need about 20% of the population, maybe 15. The rest will support the 3%. The 3% that are willing to pay a price, and then the rest that support those people and enable those people to do what needs to be done. All right, so let me get my notes up here. I'm going back old school. If those of you that have been following me for a while, you remember my old school slow chats back when I first started doing these. And I would sit, they were solo back then. I wasn't doing interviews, they were solo. And I would have a topic and I would unpack that topic and I'd write extensive notes and then sit here and chat with you guys and keep an eye on all the comments coming through and answer questions and all those sorts of things. So I'm going a little bit old school. That's exactly what I am doing here tonight. So thank you to everyone that's joining me live. There's already a couple of hundred of you between X, YouTube, and Facebook combined. And typically within the next sort of 20 minutes, we're going to have between 800 and 1,000 people watching. So I consider it an absolute privilege that you guys would take time out of your evening. And it's a real focus of mine to make sure that you get value, that you actually enjoy your time, that you get value from it, and that you finish and go, hey, that was fantastic. I'm going to tune in again. So I've spent quite a lot of time working on what I'm going to be talking about tonight. I've got notes. So if you see me looking across this way, I'm looking at my notes. If you see me looking that way, I'm looking at your comments. So please keep those comments coming in. All right, today is going to be a little bit different to my slow chat, to my podcasts recently, in that I don't have a guest today. I'm launching the Getting Your Head in the Game Masterclass. Now, this is something I've been working on for quite some time. It's something that I delayed because I felt as though I needed to get myself into a better place mentally, because if you follow my work, you know I'm going through some challenges at the moment and have been for some time. And I kept telling myself, no, I can't talk about getting your head in the game until I've overcome all of these challenges. And I had an epiphany recently, and I was chatting with some very close, some people that are very close to me. And they made the point, and quite rightly, in my opinion, that actually, given that we're all going through this together, talking about it and unpacking that, not from the point of view of, hey, I'm in a better place and I'm fine, I'm blah blah blah, but actually from the point of view of, hey, yeah, this is real, and there's some tough stuff going on here, but these are the ways in which, these are the techniques that I've developed to help me get through and to help me to overcome the various challenges, etc. I think is a really healthy thing. So what I'm going to do is tonight, I'm actually going to give you an overview of the entire Getting Your Head in the Game Masterclass. So it's a 6-week course. Today is going to bring value. If you don't want to do the course, if you can't afford the course, what have you, whatever your reason may be, that's completely fine. Tonight, I am going to give you a tremendous amount of value in the form of that overview. But obviously, I'm looking for those people that want to go deeper, that want to actually really explore, really get into the nuts and bolts, the practical. Tonight, I'm only really going to have time to talk at a relatively high philosophical level about each of the topics, and during the actual course we're going to go a lot deeper. Now, the course is going to run on Wednesday nights starting in just about a week. So what's that going to be? Wednesday the 14th, I think it's going to be. Let me actually check my dates here, so I'm not telling you a lie. When that course starts, it'll start on, let me have a look. Yeah, Wednesday the 14th. So that's this coming Wednesday. And I've done that deliberately, not on the Thursday nights, because the podcasts will continue every second week or so. I'm not doing them every single week. But I have coming up, I have Monica Smith when she feels that she can. She's in the middle of a court case. She is suing the Victorian Police for wrongful arrest right now. That court case is ongoing. One of the tricky things is, obviously, when a court case is ongoing under Australian law, you've got to be careful what you say. And Monica certainly has to be careful what she says about the court case at the moment. So we're just working through that and deciding, do we do a podcast now or soon, or do we wait until after the judgment has been handed down? That there might be, we might need to wait for that one. But actually, yesterday I was in Sydney. I was speaking at an event held up in Sydney, and I met for the second time, actually, Andrew Lowenthal, who you may know his name. He was involved. He was one of the many people involved in the Australian Twitter files. And he gave a fantastic presentation breaking down some of what they found at a level of detail that I hadn't personally seen before. So I've asked him, and he's agreed he's going to come on soon to the podcast as well. And I've got other really fantastic guests coming up. So the podcasts will continue on Thursday nights, every second or third Thursday. I'm not trying to do them every single night, every single week, excuse me. I just couldn't keep up that tempo under the current circumstances of what's going on. So the masterclass is based on things that I have been speaking about now for a couple of years. So I've done well over 100 events since the end of lockdowns in 2021. And I've been speaking on things like hope, courage, faith, community, focus, and practical next steps, things that we should all be doing in our own personal lives, in our own homes, that are going to put us into a better place to be able to move ahead and make a difference in the world as the world becomes, let's be honest, challenging. right? I don't want to be Chicken Little saying the sky is falling, but also we can't be Pollyanna and pretend like nothing's wrong. We're facing some challenging times ahead. We need to be realistic about that. We need to be sober-minded about that, but we also need to be pragmatic and practical, and rather than buying into fear, actually just take concrete steps that allow us to not be afraid, that allow us to face the future with some confidence. So the masterclass, the Getting Your Head in the Game masterclass, is 6 weeks. It focuses on focus, hope, courage, faith, community, and next steps. And I'm going to give you a high-level overview of all 6 of those tonight. So even if you don't want to do the masterclass, if you don't want to spend the money, whatever, that's completely fine. I am going to give you a good overview of all 6 topics tonight. So think of tonight as a mini masterclass, and it's free. So those of you that, it's funny, you can't do anything on the internet without someone getting upset with you. As soon as I said, hey guys, I'm actually going to create this new special thing that I'm actually going to charge money for, I got some emails from people quite grumpy at me. Oh, how dare you charge money, etc. It's like, I give away most of my work for free, and I will continue to do so. I'm not putting a paywall up in front of any of my existing work. This is just a new thing, and it's time intensive. To actually collate those thoughts and prepare it to do it in this way is time intensive, but more importantly, by having a price tag on that, it means that there's actually limited numbers. There's only a certain number of people going to be in there. Like I said before, I can't even keep up with the speed at which comments are coming through right now. So how could I possibly answer questions if there were, hundreds and hundreds, if not 1,000 or more people doing this masterclass? So by keeping it smaller, keeping it to 50 or so people or less, then I'm able to actually answer your questions and spend time with you. So it's 6 weeks. Each week is going to be about a half an hour of me breaking down and going through a particular topic, each of those 6 topics that I mentioned, followed by around about an hour or so of Q&A, so that you guys can really get your questions answered and get out of me and get out of my head whatever it is that you would like to. So just quickly, before I dive into the 6 topics, which I will be going through tonight in a mini masterclass, I am going to post into the comments here the link. So those of you that already know you want to do this, then the link will appear in YouTube and in Facebook. Unfortunately, it does not appear on the X comments. So if you're on Facebook or on YouTube and you already know that you want to go ahead and do this, the link to be able to get in is there. There are only 50 places. So if you know that you want to do this, and I suggest you jump in. And when you do make that purchase, please make sure that you click the button to receive emails. And this will make sure that there's no issues with sending you through the Zoom links when in each week via email. Okay, so like I said, these 6 topics are the ones that I've narrowed down to after more than 100 events where I've spoken all over Southeast Australia since the end of lockdowns in 2021. I've spoken, I have listened, I've had in-depth conversations with a lot of different people from a lot of different parts of Australia in very different situations. These are the 6 topics that I believe are what people want to hear about. The best of what people want to hear about, but also the best of what I think people need to hear, because what people want to hear about isn't necessarily always what I would suggest they need to be thinking about and hearing about. And so these 6 topics are really the best combination of those 2 things. It's about getting your head in the game. So there is going to be a lot of mindset stuff, and really most of tonight is going to be mindset stuff with a little bit of practical. The point of the masterclass is we can actually get a lot more specific, a lot more practical, drill down a lot deeper beneath the principles and really start to think about applications. Okay, so without further ado, let's dive in. Focus, hope, courage, faith, community, and next steps. Those are the 6 topics that I'm going to be covering right now. Let's talk about focus first and foremost. And I've picked the order of these topics very, very specifically. Focus, where you put your focus will change your life. Now, again, I have to skim through this fairly quickly. This is just kind of a mini masterclass, so we're not going into deep detail here. But it is a fact. It's an obvious fact. This isn't news to you. I'm not suggesting that you didn't already know this. But where you put your focus, it will change your life. And one of the things that concerns me with a lot of people that care about freedom and a lot of the people that are active and aware of what's going on is what can tend to happen is they start to put all of their focus into observing the problems around the world. And what that does is it means that their focus isn't available elsewhere, because we only have a limited amount of focus. We only have a limited amount of hours, of energy, of emotional energy, of money, of resources. And focus is a resource. It's a limited resource. It's a scarce resource. You only have so much. And so where you spend it makes a really big difference. And one of the things that I noticed really early on with COVID. And for those that don't know, I've been a political commentator for 15 years. So I'd been in this game talking about politics and policy and in this world for 11 years by the time COVID came along. And so I was really well placed to see things that I think a lot of other people, they're seeing them now, but they didn't see it at the time. It takes a few years to start to get a bit of perspective. And I was able to observe those things at the time. And one of the things that was immediately of concern to me was the way that people who were being woken up by the lockdowns and by genuine, reasonable concern are they're being jarred out of that apathy all of a sudden, are then going full on into exploring and researching absolutely every conspiracy theory, real or imagined, obscure or mainstream. They are just all throwing their time and energy into researching every single problem under the sun. And the problem with that is that, number one, it leads to a sense of despair and hopelessness. And we'll talk about hope in a minute. But number two, most of the time, it's a complete waste of energy. And I say that, so I apply a test. There's a 2-part test that I apply to something before I give it my focus. If there's someone comes to me and says, oh, did you hear about the whatever? Okay, whatever conspiracy, you name your favorite one. And let's be honest, a lot of conspiracy theories are true. I'm not saying they're not. But we're being bombarded with them from every direction, and not all of them are true. And so I apply a 2-stage test. The first one is to say can I prove this? Someone comes along and says, oh, the royal family are lizard people, shape-shifting lizard people. Is there a way that I could get to any kind of a primary source, an eyewitness, not someone talking about something that someone else told them? Like when you go online, a lot of this conspiracy theory stuff is, oh, well, I had this secret conversation with this person. I can't tell you what their name is or what they did, but they told me this thing. Well, that's not a primary source. That's a secondary source. There is no capacity, no opportunity for you to verify any of that information. And if you can't get to primary witnesses and if you can't get to primary documents, then I'm sorry, but you can't prove that that thing is true. So that's test number one. And if I can't prove it, I'm immediately going to go, this might not be something for me to spend focus on. But there is a second test, and that is, even if I could prove it, would it change how I live? Would it change how I'm spending my time, my money, my emotional resources, my focus? Would it really actually change anything in the real world, even if I could prove that it were true? Because the reality is, most of the time, even if you could prove these things, it wouldn't change how you live day to day, or at the very least, it shouldn't change how you live day to day. You should still be focusing on raising your kids and spending time with your friends and family and building community and looking after yourself financially and your business and your health and all of those things. That's really where our focus and energy should be going. And so I would really encourage you to have a think about where you spend your time, the media that you consume, the things that you spend your time on, especially immediately before you go to bed and as soon as you wake up. Those are the 2 times when it's really going to have a big impact on your headspace. And ask yourself, is this a use of time? I was going to say, is this a productive use of time? But not everything has to be productive. You are allowed to do things just because you like them, just because you want to. But ask yourself whether this is a use of your time that's building you up. Or whether it's something that's kind of tearing you down. And Linda, thank you for that comment there. Just saying, yeah, I've heard of this 2-part test advice from you before. You've obviously been to events or you've heard me speaking. I do talk about this quite a lot, and it was very helpful over the last couple of years. Well, Linda, thank you for that. I appreciate that. And Claire, thank you for signing up. I do appreciate that. So limited to 50 people. So if people are already jumping in, then if that's of interest to you, scroll up in the comments a little bit and you'll find the link there. I'll post the link again a little bit later on. So that's the first part of focus. Don't get distracted by the things that you cannot verify and wouldn't change how you live even if you could. But there's a lot more to it than that. So I want to clarify, I'm not saying, because I posted on Facebook a couple of days ago, about, the world is ending kind of hysteria and that it's not. And people said, well, you can't just bury your head in the sand. Well, that's true. You can't bury your head in the sand. And I'm not for a moment suggesting that you become oblivious to world events, to what people might be up to around the world. I'm not suggesting that you cut yourself off. What I'm suggesting is that you pay attention with limited amounts of your focus and divert your focus mostly into really actually the things that matter in the day-to-day. There's a thing called marginal utility. It's an economic term. I'm not going to go deep into it, But essentially, the marginal utility of a dollar diminishes as you have more and more dollars. If you have $1, getting a second dollar makes a huge difference to whether or not how many grains of rice you get to eat today. If you have $1 billion, getting another dollar, the marginal utility of that dollar is effectively zero. The difference that additional dollar makes to you is effectively zero. That concept of marginal utility actually is a tremendously powerful one, and it applies to focus as well. The first 10 minutes of focused time that you spend on any topic is going to be tremendously productive. So the first 10 minutes that you spend keeping up with world events and understanding what's going on in the world around you is going to be tremendously productive. The 10 minutes that you spend after having already spent 5 hours today is going to be, relatively speaking, unproductive. It's not likely to yield much in the way of marginal utility. But if you took that 10 minutes at the end of 5 hours and spent it on time with your kids or time with your parents or what have you, it would actually have a much greater return. So I would say, I'm not arguing you should bury your head in the sand, but I'm definitely saying think about whether spending even more time on this is really where your time needs to be focused. Okay, so now I also want to talk about focus in relationships. Now, like I said, I can only touch on the real high level stuff, right? I don't have the opportunity to go deep here because I'm trying to cover all 6 topics in one evening, and then maybe do some Q&A at the end as well. So the other thing that we're going to talk a lot more about in the masterclass, but I do want to touch on here, is focus in relationships. I had this question when I was speaking down in Melbourne about 2 months ago. Someone said to me that they found themselves in a situation where their spouse was not on the same page as them when it came to COVID, came to jabs, when it came to the government response and the lockdowns and the size of government and all those things. They're sitting there tearing their hair out saying, we disagree on these things. And I sort of said, well, how's your relationship outside of those things? Well, it's okay. Like, it's strained by the tension on those things, but fundamentally the relationship's not broken. They just have some really strong fundamental disagreements on some of those areas. And I said, look, I can't solve that problem for you. I don't have a panacea or a magic potion that can fix that problem for you. But what I can suggest is, if you spend all of your time focusing on the areas where you disagree, you're very quickly going to find yourself believing that the whole relationship is untenable. But if you accept that those things are areas where you disagree, then focus your energy on the areas where you are on the same page. It doesn't fix these problems. And again, I'm not suggesting bury your head in the sand. You don't try and pretend that doesn't exist. But why focus on it? If you already know where they stand and you know where you stand, why focus on that? Why not actually focus your attention, your time, and your relationship on the areas where you do get along and the areas where you can actually have a productive, constructive relationship? So focus is a really important aspect. The media that you consume, the activities that you engage in, the way that you interact with your family, with your friends, with your community, all of these things, simply being mindful of your focus and being mindful of marginal utility. Investing another hour on the back of the 8 that you've already spent on some black hole is going to provide you with next to no marginal utility, but spending that time somewhere else where perhaps you haven't been spending enough time can get you a tremendous return. So that's my very quick précis on focus. When we do the actual masterclass, I'm going to dive a lot deeper, and specifically one of the principles, there's a lot more to it than just this, but one of the principles I'm going to dive into is the idea that every yes has a no attached to it, and every no has a yes attached to it. If you have to say no to something now, it's because you said yes to something earlier that consumed the time, the money, the emotional energy, the resources that could have been spent on this other thing, and vice versa. If you're able to say yes to something now, it's probably because of the things you said no to in the past. And this is a mental trick that is very, very powerful for those who have trouble saying no to things. So if you find yourself overcommitting, getting too deep into things, etc., understanding the power of this, every yes has a no attached to it, and every no has a yes attached to it, or every no makes a yes, a future yes possible, is a really, really, really powerful mental trick when combined with shifting your focus. And that's one of the ways that I've gotten through some really tough times and really, really difficult times in the recent past. So I'm going to move on from focus, but that's my really quick sort of précis on focus. Oops, where are we at time-wise? Okay, yeah, that's okay. All right, good. There we go. All right. Lisa makes a great point here. It can be difficult if the disagreement is about a core value held. I'm actually going to be talking specifically about values a little bit later on tonight. Values are such a crucial thing, and I'll talk about that when we get to the courage topic a little bit later on. So yeah, if it's a peripheral value, it's easier, but if it's a core value, it can be very, very difficult. But nevertheless, we're not necessarily stumbling over our values every single day and every single moment of our relationship. It's obviously values are vital, and I'm not suggesting we compromise on those values, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we can't actually invest our time and our focus within that relationship onto the areas where we do share values, if that makes sense. So it's a tricky one to balance, and I'll have more time to go a lot deeper into that during the actual masterclass. All right, so that'll be focus. That'll be week 1. That's Wednesday the 14th. The following week, talking about hope. I'm going to cover that quickly. Again, this is just the mini masterclass. So I'm hoping you're getting value out of this. I'm hoping that you can, that at the very least, whether you do the masterclass or not, that this is going to help to bring some clarity to your thinking and improve your mindset. You know, it's getting your head in the game is the theme of this. So hope. Now, hope is vital. So the first and most important thing to say about hope is don't let go of it. There are people who have taken the black pill. They've taken the view that there's no hope, nothing can be saved, it all just needs to burn, and then maybe we'll be able to pick up the pieces later. And I understand the appeal. I really do. The black pill is very, very tempting. But I'm going to say something a little bit confrontational here. I think the majority of people who take the black pill actually do so out of cowardice and laziness. And if you're someone who's taken the black pill, you're probably angry with me right now. No, I'm not a coward. I'm not lazy. No, actually, I think there is a degree of cowardice and laziness. Taking the black pill is the easy way out. Telling yourself that there's no hope, why bother, is the easy way out. It allows you to actually not do anything and to justify why you're not doing anything. To justify why you're not even trying, why you're not willing to invest energy into anyone. So don't take the black pill, first and foremost. And my proof as to why you shouldn't take the black pill is that actually, if you step back and look objectively at what's happening in the world today, there have been way worse moments in history. The thing that makes us feel like this is worse is because the history moments we read in history books, and we know because we're reading the book that it all ended well, or that if it went bad, at least, you know, that's ancient history now. It's not personal. It doesn't affect us. Because this is us, it feels very real, and it is very real. And there's a tendency to have this idea that, oh no, this is terrible. This is a horrible, horrible thing that's happening. This is unprecedented. Well, actually, we flatter ourselves when we say that it's unprecedented. You know, I would argue that that Nazi Germany taking over most of Europe and being, for practical purposes, unstoppable was a worse moment in history. I would suggest to you that from the perspective of the Romans, the fall of the Roman Empire and the barbarians at the gates was a worse moment in history. I would suggest to you that the year with no summer, I believe it was a volcano that put so much ash up into the atmosphere that they had no summer, crops failed, there was famine everywhere, was a worse moment in history. There have been plenty of worse moments in history than what we have right now. The fact is, as much as times are tough, there's no question about that. The fact is that we are actually the wealthiest. This is actually the wealthiest time to be alive. And the standard of living that we enjoy today, even for someone who's doing it tough in Australia, is, historically speaking, a really high standard of living. So my first point on hope is to say it's very tempting to believe that this is unprecedented, this is terrible, the world has never seen anything like this before, what a horrible time to be alive. That's simply not true. Now, what's really important here is, as we think about hope, number one, don't take the black pill. Number two, when you hear people talking about, you know, there's no hope, there's no point, there's no whatever, ask yourself why. Because if they actually believed that it was all pointless, they wouldn't bother trying to convince you that it's all pointless, right? If someone actually believes you can't save anything, you can't, you know, just give up. If someone actually believes that, they're not going to be out there investing their time and energy trying to convince you to give up as well. If they've actually given up, they don't care what you do. They might kind of have a little giggle as you go past trying to change the world, as they cynically sit there and go, oh, well, you know, there goes another one. There goes another idiot. But actually, if someone's trying to convince you that there's no hope, why? If they actually believed that there was no hope, they would not bother. So what's in it for them? Why are they really actually investing their time into trying to convince you of something that it is pointless to convince you of? And if they actually believed that there was no hope, they would recognize that it was pointless and they wouldn't bother spending their energy doing that. So what's in it really for them? The unfortunate reality is that across all spheres of media, mainstream, alternative, etc., fear sells, and despair sells remarkably well. So unfortunately, there are people out there, and mainstream media do this all the time, whether it's the climate change narrative, etc., or other things. But there are people out there who are very, very happy to monetize your eyeballs for the sake of just their own benefit. And they will follow the metrics in whatever direction the metrics lead. And the metrics, unfortunately, often lead towards bad news being the thing that sells. If it bleeds, it leads. And what could be worse news than all hope is gone, abandon hope, or ye who enter here kind of idea. So I would really caution, if you find yourself tempted by the black pill, or if you find yourself listening to people that are really kind of black pilling you, ask yourself why. Why are you listening to them, and why are they doing that? Because if they believe their own bullshit, they wouldn't be coming at it from that angle. So that's on the black pill, firstly. So that's easy, no black pill. But then what? What do we have in its place? Well, the other side of the black pill, and it's just as toxic, is this idealistic, ridiculous optimism that some people unfortunately have, and some people unfortunately have sold. At the last federal election, we saw some people running around saying, oh, we're going to form government, whether it was a minor party or a new startup party or various things like that. And unfortunately, that was never realistic. That was never going to happen. And I copped flack at the time for daring to say, guys, that's not a realistic promise. You're setting yourself up to look like an idiot, and you're setting the people that believe you up for disappointment by making these unrealistic promises that are simply not going to happen. So the black pill is toxic, and it's a problem, but also blind optimism, sort of stupidity in that sense, optimistic stupidity is also really dangerous. And it gets really dangerous. There's a verse in the Bible that says the hope deferred makes the heart sick. So when you have an expectation, a hope that you're trusting that something's going to happen, and then it doesn't, then you find yourself saying, well, why not? Oh, maybe there isn't hope. Maybe the thing that I believed in isn't real, and we're not going to get anywhere. And if that happens enough times, ironically, people go straight from this sort of blind, optimistic, naive hope straight into the black pill, and don't sort of stop part way and go, okay, well, what if I actually just scaled my ambitions and my expectations to a more realistic level? Maybe my hopes would actually start to come true. Maybe I would actually start to see some progress. And so both of those extremes are a real problem. So what do you hope for? I would encourage you to, so Emma is just saying, what's the black pill? The black pill is my kind of shorthand. It's widely used. It's not my idea. In the Matrix, they take the red pill or the blue pill, and the red pill meant that they'd come out of the Matrix and learn about what was going on, and the blue pill would have put them back in. The black pill is kind of despair. It's people who just say, you know what, there's no point, there's no hope, nothing's going to change, nothing's going to be able to be improved, and they just give up and they check out. That's what the black pill is. It's just a shorthanded way of kind of referencing that. Okay, so what should we be hoping for? And I'll go into a lot more detail in this in the full length masterclass. But again, I'm trying to give you value here tonight. Set your hopes on things that are actually achievable and realistic. Changes that you could actually see. Changes, and specifically changes that you might actually have some ability to influence. See, if you're hoping for something, but you have no ability to influence the outcome, then you're kind of putting yourself in a really vulnerable position. You're setting yourself up for disappointment, but also your hopes don't then spur you to action. Ideally, you hope for something, and that hope inspires you to then take action and to go and to do something about that hope. That's the best possible combination. But so oftentimes because we're talking about global problems, we're talking about the World Economic Forum, we're talking about 15-minute cities, we're talking about the climate change scam and the way that they're rorting us and ripping us off with that. We're talking about things that are happening way above our pay grade. And if we set our hopes on, something happening in the US election or something happening in these other places, if that's where our hope is pinned, we have no ability to influence that outcome. And therefore that hope does not lead to action. It doesn't actually have a practical outcome in our lives. And then if it does come true, if our hope comes true, we can be excited about that, but it doesn't actually say anything about us and our work. And there's no gratification, there's no reward for work in that sense. And humans need that. Psychologically, we need that. So the healthier way to use hope, it's a natural human emotion. We want to have hope. The better way to use hope is to focus on the things that you actually have some involvement in, the things that you might actually be able to influence the outcome of, and to then decide, well, what's possible? What's the best that we can hope for here? Set your hopes on that, and then use that hope as a cattle prod on yourself to spur you into action to try and work towards that thing. And now you've got a really positive relationship with your hopes. Your hopes are leading you to take action, to do things, to make the world a better place. So that's the healthier form of hope. Jocelyn's asking if I'm joining the Epic podcast this weekend. I would have liked to have. I was invited. The guys did invite me, so thank you to them. I was in Sydney yesterday. I stayed overnight in Sydney. I drove back today, and then I had to prepare for this, so it just wasn't practical. I wanted to give you guys a lot of value here tonight. So unfortunately, it wasn't practical for me to do that. But I thank the guys for the offer. Couple of final points on hope. This fight was going on. The fight for freedom was going on long before you were born, and it will be going on long after you were dead. If you set your hopes on some kind of a Hollywood moment, that cliched Hollywood action film ending where the city's burning down around them, but the heroes embrace, and this whole city is around clapping their hands going, oh, you're amazing. We thought you were the villains, but it turns out you were the heroes. That only happens in Hollywood. That doesn't happen in real life. So if that's what you're pinning your hopes on, I can tell you already, you are going to die disappointed. You are not going to see that happen in your lifetime. So don't do that to yourself. Don't set yourself up for perpetual disappointment simply because you're setting your hope on things that don't happen in the real world. We need to make sure that we are celebrating wins. Now, that means we need to recognize wins. We need to actually understand, what does a win look like in the real world? It doesn't look like a Hollywood thing. What does it look like in the real world? And I'm going to have time to dive into that in a lot more detail in the masterclass, and to understand really what we should be trying to do, what we should be setting our hopes on, and what we should be looking for to encourage ourselves that there are some wins and things happening. But I'll do a very quick survey of a couple of recent ones here in Australia. We were told, don't bother trying to resist the voice vote, and don't bother trying to campaign for the no side because you've already lost. Well, it turns out we won. We were told that the misinformation, disinformation bill was a done deal. Don't bother trying to stop that. They're just going to ram it through. The magical they want it to happen, therefore it's going to happen. Well, it's been put on ice, and they haven't spoken about it this year. It doesn't seem like it's going to come off ice this year. That's been put into the never. That's what wins look like. Now, those are defensive wins where they're attacking us and we're defending. And sometimes we lose, sometimes we win. What we need to get to, and progress is being made on this point, I'll talk a lot more about this in the masterclass, is shifting that momentum so that we're the ones taking ground. We're the ones on the offensive, and they are defending. The government is defending as we take back our power, as we take back our authority, as we take back our freedom. And some of those battles they'll win, and they'll keep power that they shouldn't have, and other battles they will lose, and we will regain power that rightly belongs to us. But that's a much more exciting world to be in, isn't it? If we're the ones on the front foot. Now, we're not there yet. I believe we'll get there, and I believe that momentum is shifting. I've talked about that before, but we need to absolutely. Oh, here we go. Someone's just going and spamming. Sorry, let me get rid of. There's a person here, Dianod something or other. Trying to sell things. So I'm just going to block them. All right. So we need to shift that momentum. We're not quite there yet. But see, that's one of the things that I'm hoping for, is to see a shift away from us fighting defensive battles and towards us fighting offensive battles, where we're the ones actually taking back some of our freedom. That's an achievable goal. That can happen in my lifetime. And that can happen, actually, I think it's going to happen a lot faster than that. But those are the kinds of things we need to be looking for, because we can measure those wins, we can celebrate those wins, we can encourage ourselves, and our hope is being rewarded. We hoped for a thing. That hope inspired us to work hard because it was a thing that was at our level. It was something that we could influence. And by working hard, we achieved a thing. And now, when the next thing comes up, we're going to be even more motivated to go and to get involved again and to do even more. If hope deferred makes the heart sick, Well, hope fulfilled brings joy to the heart. And so what we need to do, and again, it relates to focus. That's why I've structured these things in the order that I have. If we shift our focus onto the things that we have control over, and we start pinning our hopes on those things that we can contribute to and achieve, then we can create this really positive spiral. Instead of the despair and the worry and the depression, etc., that so many are experiencing right now, we can get our head in the game, bring our focus to where we can make a difference, and by focusing on and hoping for things that we can contribute to and achieve, we can create an upward spiral. Okay, so that's what we're going to be focusing on a lot more and going into a lot more detail on in the masterclass. So that'll be week 2 of the masterclass. Week 3 of the masterclass is all about courage. So courage is a really, really interesting topic. And I spoke on courage yesterday in Sydney. And it's not a topic that I've addressed specifically. So this is obviously, this masterclass is topics that I have spoken about, dozens of times per topic since the end of COVID, since the end of the lockdowns, as I've spoken well over 100 times around Southeast Australia. Courage is the exception. Courage is one that I've only begun to speak about very, very recently. And in fact, I only really dedicated an entire event to it yesterday for the very first time. And it's because it took me a long time to actually understand what it is, or more specifically, what it isn't. I'll tease you by saying this, and I will explain this tonight before we're done. Courage doesn't exist. That was the breakthrough. I finally realized courage as its own discrete entity doesn't exist. And once I grasped that, I suddenly came to understand, where does it come from? Why do some people have it? Why don't they? So why do some people have it and others don't? I said in my closing address at the Friedman conference in 2022, I think it was, might have been 23. I said in my closing address there that moral cowardice is the great scourge of our time. That we are faced with a time where people lack moral courage. Now, as soon as you use the word moral, a lot of people think culture warrior, blah, blah, blah. That's not me. Those of you that have been following me for a long time, you know I'm not a culture war guy. I just can't get myself excited about that. I'm a libertarian. I just think the government should stay out of a lot of the culture war stuff. When I talk about moral courage, I'm not talking about culture war. I'm talking about an understanding of the fundamentals, the deepest fundamentals of what's right and wrong, and a willingness to pay a price to stand up for what is right. And what the first step in me cracking this particular nut was realizing that there is a world of difference between physical courage and moral courage. There are many people that have physical courage who are moral cowards, and that got exposed in them during COVID. Police officers who would run into a burning building to save a child without hesitation. They have physical courage. I don't question their physical courage, but they showed absolute moral cowardice when it came to standing up for human rights at a time when, they were being told to be afraid. They showed absolute moral cowardice when it came to standing up to their superiors who were giving them orders that violated human rights. How can there be such a difference in the same person when they would show such courage over here and yet such cowardice over here? It's because physical courage and moral courage are not the same thing. Physical courage requires you to see and observe a danger with your eyes, and to make a decision with your mind that you're going to put yourself at risk to try and do the right thing. Moral courage can't be seen with your eyes. It has to be seen with your mind. You have to be able to actually see and have insight at a much deeper level in order to perceive moral dangers before they've actually already come about. And then the decision to do something doesn't come from your mind. It has to come from somewhere much, much deeper. And what that involves is your soul. And the litmus test, the yardstick that is used to decide whether or not you're going to take action is actually your values. So there was a comment earlier that discussed values, and I said we're going to get to that tonight. Well, this is it. What I realized as I began to break this down in my head is that courage doesn't exist by itself. Courage is an action. It exists in action. All right. So once you act with courage, you have courage. Until you've acted with courage, it can't really be said that you're being courageous. It's not until you see it expressed as an act that it exists. So courage as an abstract doesn't exist. Acts of courage exist. So the question becomes, why do some people act and others don't? It's not why do some people have courage as though courage is a thing. No. Why do some people act and others don't? Why do some people run towards the problem and other people run away? What I realized is because courage and that act of courage, that decision to act with courage, comes from your values and your identity. I can only touch on these briefly tonight, but I'll give you as much value as I can in the time that we've got. Your identity. Let's start there. How you identify. No, I'm not going all woke on you. Don't worry about that. But your identity is essentially the thing that you reaffirm every single day by how you behave, by how you comport yourself in the world, by the job that you have, the family relationships that you have, by who you are and how you act and how you live, right? Your identity is constructed out of how you live each and every day. Your values, on the other hand, are the things that you would die for. Your identity is constructed out of how you live. Your values are the things that you would sacrifice your life for, to uphold. Now, we're going to talk a lot more about this in the actual masterclass, talking about the idea that actually none of us are living for anything. You can't live for something. You can only give your life for something. And at the end of our lives, we've all given our lives for something, whether we know it or not, whether we like it or not. Sounds a little bit morbid, but actually when you really grasp it, it's quite empowering. But we don't have time to go down that particular rabbit hole today. What I want to focus on is courage comes to people. And if you look at people that have shown courage in different circumstances, it is very, very common to hear them say, well, I didn't have a choice. I didn't feel like I could do anything else. I felt like I had to do that. It didn't strike me as courageous at the time. It was just, I had to do that thing, right? Why? How is it perceived from their perspective like that? Well, because from their perspective, they didn't have courage. From their perspective, they saw something that violated their values, and they have an identity, an idea of themselves that will not allow them to turn a blind eye. And that's why courage comes from values and identity. You have moral courage when you see something happening that violates your values, the things that you'd be willing to die for. And you have an identity, the way that you live is such that you will not turn a blind eye and look the other way. And the people that I feel really sorry for are the people that had the values, but whose identity was one that allowed them to turn a blind eye and walk away, and didn't require them to actually get in and do something about it. Because now their conscience has to live for the rest of their life, and knowing that their values were violated. They saw something that violated their values that they knew was wrong, and they didn't have the courage, they didn't possess the identity to actually do something about it. Now, what is this identity? Well, how do we have that identity that allows us to then intervene and take those risks and be courageous in those moments where we see that our fundamental values are being violated? Well, that's something we're going to dive much more deeply into in the masterclass. But essentially, I believe it comes from perspective. It comes from the time horizon over which you are viewing yourself. The thing with doing the right thing against whatever oppression, against government, against what have you, the cost is up front. Right? The reason why it requires courage to do that is because it comes with a cost. But if you don't do it, then you can avoid that cost in the short term, but you live with that knowledge for the rest of your life that you were a coward. If you do it, you pay that cost in the short term. That's what makes it a test of courage. But you live the rest of your life knowing that you passed that test and you were that person. And so this is why it comes down to your identity. Are you the kind of person that can live with yourself for the rest of your life knowing that you are a coward? Is that your identity? Because if it's not, then you'll look at your values being violated and you'll realize you don't have a choice. It isn't about courage in that moment for you. You just have to go. You just have to do, right? So that's the most important thing. Kat, I tolerate a lot, but you're being a real so-and-so. Okay, if this isn't for you, it's not for you. Okay, if you keep this up, I will actually just ban you off the page because I'm tired. All right, so we're going to discuss values. We're going to discuss identity. We're going to explore how you find and define what your values are, what your identity is and needs to be, and how do you influence that? If you look at yourself, if you take an honest look at yourself. And I was chatting with someone in Sydney yesterday actually about this. And if you take an honest look at yourself and you go, okay, I don't think I have what it takes. I think I would turn a blind eye. And I don't want to turn a blind eye. I don't want to be that person. But if I honestly do a stock take of myself, I'm worried that I might be that person. What is it that you can do to address that weakness and get to the point where actually when your test comes, you can actually pass that test. You don't have to live with yourself for the rest of your life, knowing that you didn't pass that test. So, all right. Now, okay, so we're halfway through. Those are the first 3 weeks. That was focus, hope, and courage. So what I'm going to do, we've got 3 more to go. We've got faith, which is not just religious faith, by the way. I'm not just talking about religious faith. I'm talking about faith in humanity, faith in yourself. But also, yes, religious faith forms a part of that, no question. So we've got faith, we've got community, which is your intimate relationships, your family. They are a part of your community, but also your wider community. And how do you establish that? And on what basis does that community form? Why do some communities work and other ones fail? And then we're going to talk about next steps. And that's where we'll get really practical in the masterclass. And yes, I will give you some more practical next steps and things to think about and things that you can do going away tonight. But if you're liking what you're hearing and you want to be a part of this masterclass, I'm just going to repost the link. So that link is going to pop up again in YouTube and in Facebook. So if you do want to be a part of this, places are very much limited. So please do click that link and grab your spot now, even while I'm still going through this introduction here tonight. Okay, so that's popped up now. That should have popped up in both Facebook and YouTube comments. So if you're watching on one of those 2 platforms, that link will be there. All right, so week 4. We've already gone through the first 3 weeks. How far in? Let me just do a time check here. Oh, yeah, okay, good. All right. I'm going to have to speed up a little bit. Sorry, guys. Right, week 4, we're going to talk about faith. And like I said, we're not just talking about religious faith, although, yes, I'm a Christian. Yes, I think that's an incredibly important thing. If you haven't, had a look at what Christianity is about and what Jesus did, I suggest you have a good look. But that's not actually what this session is focused on. There's an interesting thing. There's a reality that we have to maintain a certain amount of faith, a certain amount of belief in our fellow human beings and in ourselves. And this builds on hope and what you're hoping for and so forth. Like I said, the structure, the order in which these have been designed is very, very intentional. But there's a lot of people, it's really funny, they'd be libertarians or inclined towards freedom, but they take an incredibly dim view of their fellow human being. And I've always found that funny because it's actually statists, people who believe in big government, whether that's fascism or communism or whatever form that may take, the welfare state, etc. It's the people who believe in big government that have no faith in their fellow man. People who believe in freedom, fundamentally, we believe in each other. If I believe the government shouldn't have power over me and you to dictate our lives and micromanage us, what I'm basically saying is I think you can do a better job. I have some faith in you to be able to live your life. And so on the I always find it really, really funny when I meet people on the pro-freedom side who take a really dim view of their fellow human beings. I just find that it's how do you reconcile that? I'm really not sure. But I want to say the first thing, if you don't have faith in humanity, just take a step back and look around at the world we live in today. We stand on the shoulders of giants, people that sacrificed so much, worked their entire lives, people that invented technologies and created art and incredible entertainment and philosophy, people that built infrastructure, people that figured out ways of living and organizing society and doing all sorts of incredible things. We stand on the shoulders of giants. And to me, I look around and I go, humans are incredible. Yes, okay, there's some real assholes among them. There are some real pieces of work, all right? And I do my best to avoid them. But actually just take a step back and just have a look at how we live. And that is a testament to the fact that you can have some faith in your fellow human beings. We have what we have today, such as it is, and it's not perfect, but we have what we have today because of the fact that other people that came before us in generations before us were worthy of us putting some faith in them. And they've given to us, they've bestowed upon us the gift of their hard work and their investment into the world that we live in today. So that's the first thing. I just again, a little bit like hope, don't take the black pill. When it comes to faith and faith in other people, don't fall for this trap of just taking a really dim view of other people just because, right? Oh, you can't trust anyone. Well, actually, there's a lot of trustworthy people out there. You can't assume that every single individual you meet is individually trustworthy, right? That's true. But actually, as you get to know them, you'll find that a lot of them are, right? And then you weed out the ones that aren't. So that's my first point on faith. Have a bit of faith in your fellow man. What's also interesting is that in real time, there would have been many moments in history where you would have looked around and gone, oh, the world's gone to pot. Maybe in the old days you could trust people, but these days it's bad. It's terrible. These days it's, you can't trust anyone these days. Well, almost every generation in history has said that. Almost every generation in history has been able to point to the world in some way, shape, or form and say, oh, well, things aren't the way they used to be. That might have been true once upon a time, but it's not true anymore. Don't fall for that. So there's faith in others at an individual level, right? Get to know people, and you'll find that most people are actually really lovely people, and you can have faith in them. You can actually depend on them. But there's also faith in sort of humanity at that aggregate level. And this is the invisible hand, Adam Smith's invisible hand. And he talks about the invisible hand in economics. I'm going to use a lot of sort of economic examples because economics is something that I've spent a lot of time wrapping my mind around, and it's really useful. Economics is a fantastic, I'll call it a science. Some people get upset when you call economics a science, but I think it's incredibly valuable and applies to many things that are not in the economy. But this idea of the invisible hand of Adam Smith is where he talked about the fact that in contrast to central planners, communists, fascists, etc., they think that because the government can get more information, the government can therefore make better decisions, and that therefore we should let the government make our economic decisions for us. What to invest in, what prices should be, all these sorts of things, because they've got better information, and therefore central planning is better. The invisible hand theory, which I would say is much more than a theory, I'd say it's a fact, I'd say it's how the world actually operates, simply says no one can have all the information. It does not matter how, even if it were possible to feed all of the data into some bureaucracy somewhere and have them interpret that data correctly, the fact is the individual circumstances of every single person affected by a given policy or spending or pricing or what have you are just far too complex. And so each individual making their own decisions based on the limited data that they have will in the end lead to better outcomes. Now, that's not to say that every individual will get a better outcome. If someone is foolish, or if someone just completely misinterprets the data and doesn't understand the way the world works or something like that, they're going to get hurt. But there's other people who are going to see that happen and learn from it and go, oh, they tried that thing and that really didn't work. Why not? Let me understand that. And then they'll go on to make better decisions. And so in the end, this invisible hand, each person doing what they believe is the right thing based on the information that they have from their perspective actually ends up getting to a better result, leading to a better place. And that's the invisible hand. It's definitely true economically. I would argue that it's very, very true in the freedom movement as well. And I'll be spending quite a lot of time on this particular night. This will be week 4 as we talk about faith, talking about what I learned watching the invisible hand at work in the freedom movement in Melbourne. Because there were initially different competing groups of protest organizers. There were people that didn't trust each other. There were people that were trying to undermine each other. There were people that were making competitive decisions against each other as they each tried with their own limited information to do what they thought was the right thing to do. At first, it looked like an absolute mess. And a lot of people came to me and they were like, Topher, what do we do? We need to, can you do something? You've been at this game for 10 years already. Can you weed out the bad eggs and blah, blah, blah. And I just told people, this is going to sort itself out. Just hang tight. Keep showing up. Don't lose faith. This is going to sort itself out. And sure enough, it did. And the same thing is unfolding right now where people are getting up in arms. Oh, there's all these different people trying all these different things. And those people over there are trying to do lawsuits. And those people over there are trying to do politics. And these people over here are doing something else. And I don't even know what those people are trying to do. And we have to get everyone around one idea. We need everyone to work together on one single thing. No, we don't. No, we don't. Trust in your fellow man and trust in the invisible hand and trust that as each person is doing the thing that they believe is the right thing to do, most of us will prove to be wrong. And I say us deliberately, like I'm doing what I believe to be the right thing to do. I might prove to be wrong. It might turn out that the thing that I've invested my energy into isn't the thing that might have been ideal. But if we all just say, no, we're only doing one thing, we're all getting behind that one thing. Well, what if that one thing turns out to not be the right thing? That's the central planner's mistake. They say, we'll get all the information, then we'll make one decision for everybody. And then that decision turns out to be wrong. And it's a disaster for everybody. Have a bit of faith in your fellow man at the individual level, but also have a bit of faith in your fellow man and the invisible hand that guides us at that group level. Yeah, James makes a great point. Everyone needs to do the same thing, or the totalitarians will win. That is quite a totalitarian instinct. That's a great line, James. Okay, so that's faith in your fellow man at an individual level, at an aggregate level. But I also want to talk about faithfulness, and this cuts back to values, which obviously we will have covered a week earlier in this. The reality is, I'm sorry to break it to you if you didn't know this already, but of course you do know this. We are all going to die. At some point, every single one of us, our lives come to an end. And at that point, whatever it is that we leave behind is what we gave our life for. Whatever it is that we leave behind is what we gave our life for. Right? Now, we may not have realized that at the time. We might have thought we were living for pleasure or living for money or living for power or what have you. Well, all of that's gone when you're dead. The only thing that you lived for in reality is whatever actually outlives you, whatever's left behind after you're gone. And in that context, faithfulness, it's an essential part of faith. Faithfulness becomes really, really crucial. You know, again, using another Bible analogy, for those of you that don't believe, I'm not going to apologize. The Bible is a valid book and contains an enormous amount of wisdom, even if you don't believe that it's actually specifically true, although I do. But the Apostle Paul talks about running the race to the end, being faithful to the end, continuing all the way to the end. And this is such an important concept. There are so many people, and this comes back to hope as well. They set their hopes on things that are just unrealistic. They can't accomplish them. And as a result, they get disillusioned. And then they fall away and they stop. They will, oh yeah, I used to believe those. I used to think that freedom was good. I used to think that we could get somewhere. I used to, right? And they, because they set their hope on unrealistic goals, they end up black-pilling themselves and walking away. And then they have to live the rest of their life with that sense of regret, with that sense of despair that comes with that. And then when they die, what do they leave behind? Have they accomplished anything? Have they changed anything? Are they leaving a legacy behind? Are they passing on to their descendants the freedoms that were passed on to them? Or at least trying? Did they at least try? See, for me, one of my values is that I could not possibly live with myself if I didn't at least try. That's not one of my values. It's part of my identity. A core part of my identity is that I could not live with myself if I didn't at least try. I can't be certain that I'll succeed, but my identity requires me to try. And I will continue to do that until the day I die. What that looks like, I don't know yet. But that's not the point. The point is that I will be faithful. And I'll come back to where we started on this topic of faith before I move on to the next one. We have what we have in the world today because human beings that came before us were faithful. They worked hard and they left behind more and better than what they found when they came. When they left the earth, it was in a better place than when they arrived. And that's why we enjoy what we enjoy today. And I believe we have an absolute obligation to be faithful to their legacy and to be faithful to our descendants to then go on and do the same thing. Whether or not we accomplish the specific things we're trying to accomplish is secondary. Okay, maybe we will, maybe we won't. Those things will be decided at a much higher pay grade than just us at an individual level doing our work. But what we can decide is whether we will be faithful. And that's a really, really crucial point. So faith in other humans at an individual level, get to know individuals. You'll find the majority of them are trustworthy. The majority of them are helpful. The majority of them can be a part of your community and a part of your life. Get to understand faith in humanity at an aggregate level. Understand the invisible hand, that even the people that you look at and go, oh, that's such a waste of time. Well, sometimes they turn out to be the ones who were right, or they at least accomplished something. And sometimes the thing that you were sure was a dead set winner wasn't. And you'll be glad that they didn't listen to you, and you'll be glad that they went about doing their own thing. So faith, understanding, have some faith in humanity at the aggregate level, and then faithfulness to continue to persist, to leave that legacy such as it is as best as you can. And it all comes back to values and identity, which we will have covered in the earlier week talking about courage. All right, so that's week number 4, talking about faith. Week number 5, talking about community. Now, I'm going to have to keep this short. I'm already over time. So we've got week 5, community, and week 6, next steps, practical things that you can do to begin to move your life into a better direction. So community, again, keeping this really tight. First point, you can't do this alone. Some people have this egotistical idea of being an island, of I'm going to be completely self-sufficient. Self-sufficiency, I would argue, is not actually possible. The only way self-sufficiency is possible is if you start by spending a bunch of money on things that were made by a bunch of other people and importing those essentially into your self-sufficiency. True self-sufficiency, where you walk naked onto a piece of bare land, or it could be a piece of forested land or what have you, but you walk with nothing. And if you want a tool, you have to make it. If you want shelter, you have to make it. We do this in TV shows, right? Not the modern day Survivor. What's the other one? Someone help me out in the comments. What's the modern day? They drop them on an island, like individually. They're just trying to like real sort of survival stuff. Someone help me out with the name of that show. If you want to say, oh, I'm going to be self-sufficient, you go alone. Thank you, Ross. Talk to me when you've done that. All right. And then you can talk to me about self-sufficiency. What most people actually mean when they say self-sufficiency is they're going to spend a whole bunch of money buying up other people's work. Thank you, everyone. There's a heap of people just saying alone. Mr. Stu says naked and afraid. No, I think that's just you on a Friday night, Stu. Sorry, inside joke. Stu and I are good friends. So what most people mean when they say self-sufficient is that they're going to bring in a whole bunch of other people's work. They're going to bring in guns and ammunition and shelter and clothing and batteries and solar panels and da. That's not self-sufficiency, all right? That's off grid. Okay, no problem. I'm not knocking it, but understand you cannot do this alone. And even the people that think they can are actually depending on an enormous amount of help and input from other people. And I say help, yeah, okay, there might be products that they're buying, but they're being helped by those products. That's why they're buying them. So you can't do this alone. And if you think you can, you're wrong. That's point number 1 when it comes to community. It's also counterproductive to try for reasons that we'll get to as we talk about community. So let's talk about what is community. A community essentially is people that you know, who know you, who you would come to their aid by default. If you found out that they needed aid, you would come to their aid by default. Unless you couldn't, you would. And who would also come to your aid by default. Unless there was some reason why they couldn't, they would. That's a community. You know them, they know you. You'll drop things unless circumstances really stop you from doing it, you will drop everything to give them a hand. And unless circumstances stop them from doing it, they'll drop everything to give you a hand. That's a community. The tragic reality is most of us have a community in that sense, by that definition, that is vanishingly small, right? I'm blessed. I'm very, very fortunate to have a small but very real community around me, and that's been proven this year. We've had some dramas this year, and the way that people have just come in and gone, hey, how can I help? It's just been phenomenal, incredible, and we couldn't have done it without a community around us. But we're in a somewhat unique position. Not everyone's in that position. And so thinking about what a community is and how you build it, how you contribute to it, how you be a valuable member of it is really important. So let's talk about that. A community doesn't have to be geographically local, but it's helpful if it is. It also, though, doesn't have to be next door. You might have a community of 8 other families or people, households in your area that might be within a 1-hour driving radius of you. And that can still be a community. That's still a meaningful amount of connection and community for you to be able to have access to should times get tough, or should you need some help, or should someone else need help. So it's not essential that you be on each other's doorstep necessarily. What is essential is that you have relationship. They know you, you know them, and not just a nod as you could live next door to someone for 20 years and have no relationship with them. You nod at each other as you walk past. Hey, nice day, isn't it? Yeah, nice day. You've got no relationship, right? So you've got to have relationship. They actually know who you are, and they actually give a shit, and you actually know who they are. And guess what? You have to give a shit about them too. It takes work. It takes effort. You've got to invest in a community. You also have comms. You have the ability to talk to each other. Now, these days, that's relatively easy. We've got phones. We can send SMSs. We've got some Facebook Messenger and these sorts of things. But just have a little think. What happens if let's say, there's a massive geomagnetic storm and the grid goes down, or cell towers aren't working, phone towers aren't working, these sorts of things. Would you know where to find them? Would you know how to communicate with them if you needed to? You don't necessarily have to have a backup plan. You don't have to become doomsday preppers unless that's something that you want to do. But have a think, like, what are going to be the moments where you really need to communicate with them? It's not going to be the moments when everything's hunky-dory and everything's fine. It's going to be the moments when things are going wrong. What are those things? What are the most likely candidates for those things? And can you still communicate with these people? Are they still a part of your contactable community where you can be there for them when they need you and they will be there for you when you need them? That's not possible if you can't communicate with each other. So you need to have relationship. You need to have comms. You need to have thought about your transport. And this is going to be particularly relevant if we do face a future 15-minute city type of situation. How are you going to physically reach each other? Physically get to each other's aid? Again, it's not essential. You can have members of your community that aren't geographically local, but you're going to be most valuable to each other if you are geographically local. And then what are the reasons why you're reaching each other? What's the skill and equipment that you have, that you offer? Do you know what others have and what they offer? Do you know who you would call for a given particular situation or thing? Do the others know that they can call on you for a given particular situation or thing? So that's where the relationship comes in, and being kind of intentional about it and just saying, hey guys, I happen to have this thing, whatever it is, just so you know, if you ever need a hand with XYZ, just let me know. Right? And they'll log that away in the back of their brain. And then when the shit hits the fan and things go wrong, then you know the reasons why you can call on them. You know how you're going to get to them or how they're going to get to you. You know how you're going to communicate with each other, and you have enough relationship that you know enough about each other that you trust each other, and you know how you can be helpful to each other. But here's a reality. Most attempts to build communities fail spectacularly. And they fail because they usually try to defy the laws of economics. Now, like I said, I'm going to talk a lot, not in depth. This isn't a course about economics, but we're going to touch on economics in a lot of different ways, because economics is really, really crucial. When people try and form a hippie commune, have everything in common, no one owns anything, we're all just sharing, free love, man, it always turns toxic. It usually turns into a cult, or it turns into a horribly abusive situation. It turns into a situation where some people are being used and taken advantage of and walk away with nothing, having lost everything, whilst others are hoarding and taking everything. Communism doesn't work, and that's true at a country level. It's also true at a community level. Okay, so you need to be willing to help out people for free, and you need to be willing, should the situation really arise where you need it to, you should be willing to accept free help as well. But that should not be what the community is built on. And this is really, really crucial. It might be a little bit counterintuitive, but trust me, if something is not financially sustainable, it is not sustainable. If your community is not financially sustainable, your community will fall to pieces. And this is why most of these attempts at sort of socialist communities fall apart, is because ultimately they just cannot survive if they're not financially sustainable. So this sounds all capitalistic, and it is capitalistic, but let's just think this through. Money is a way of measuring whether or not what you are offering is valuable according to somebody else. And it's the according to somebody else that's really important here. I could say, well, I'm going to come into your community and I'm going to bring my incredible artistic prowess. I tip buckets of paint over rocks, and you all get to admire my incredible artworks. That's the value that I'm going to bring to you. And in my opinion, I might think that that's the most valuable thing ever. I'm just going to tip blue paint on that rock and red paint on that rock. And oh, can you just see the artwork, the commentary on the state of, I don't know, politics in America with the blue paint and the red paint? I could make up some wank, right? And I say, okay, I'm, $10 for a ticket. Come and see my painted rocks. And you go, well, no thanks. And here's the funny thing. People lie with their lips. You might go, oh, look, I can see the commentary. That's really amazing. Oh, wow, that's just so deep. Okay. You lie with your lips because you want to be nice to me, but you won't lie with your money. And the fact that everyone's saying, oh, love the painted rocks. Oh, no, look, I'm not going to spend $10 to get a ticket. I'm not going to buy you another bucket of paint so you can do it again to some other rock. Well, that's information. That's language. That's telling me something. And so when you form a community, if money never changes hands, you never get the opportunity to find out whether what you're doing is actually valuable to that community, right? Understand that it's a crucial part of language. So if you have practical skills and you can repair electronics or something like that, Well, from time to time, a situation is going to arise where you can repair something that's broken, and that's valuable to the person that who you're repairing it for. And you should, by default, and again, there's nothing wrong with helping people out for free. I'm not against charity, but the default position of the community, unless it's necessary to be otherwise, the default position should be that payment is made. Why? Because it's a crucial part of language. You don't know if what you're offering is actually valuable or if people are lying to you. They'll say nice things. It's when they're willing to actually say, hey, here's a couple of dollars from me to say thank you for what it is that you've done for me today, for my community today, what have you. That's what we do every time we buy food. We say thank you for making good, edible food available to me at a place where I can go and get it easily. And sometimes, depending on your particular circumstances, you might be willing to pay a little bit more for the food that's more convenient. You'll pay more for a pizza that's ready to eat than you will for just ingredients that you then have to prepare and cook yourself. Why? Well, because it's made your life easier in other non-monetary ways. So you'll pay that extra little bit of money. It saved you some time. It saved you some trouble. You're hungry right now. You just want to be able to eat, etc. And so the value of something changes. This is an important, again, economic concept. The value of something changes depending on the context, depending on the buyer, the viewer. Value is in the eye of the beholder. And if you try and base your community around no money, oh, no, we don't charge each other money, you are missing half the conversation. And it's impossible for you to really find out whether what you're offering to the community is valuable to them or not. So don't try and make your community a communist community. But there's other reasons why you need others around you and why you shouldn't try and do it alone. Number one is economies of scale. And number two is division of labor. And number three is specialization. These are all essentially, they're very, very similar, very, very related concepts. Fundamentally, if you were literally trying to go it alone, and you were only going to use things that you had mined, you're not going to use a metal tool that you bought. You're going to mine the metal and refine the metal and make the tool yourself. You're going to make the fabric for the house, or make the materials for the house that you're going to live in. You're only going to use things that came off your block of land, and you're starting from absolute zero. Well, you're going to live in abject poverty and probably die of malnutrition or poor sanitation or something like that very, very quickly. But if you had 100 people together who started with nothing, but were working together, then what happens is the division of labor kicks in. Instead of one person having to figure out everything, each person can focus on things that, they spend more time on that thing. They get better at it. They get faster. They get more efficient. The fact that they're doing the same thing over and over again with the same tools allows them to get a lot more done, to be more productive. And this is missed oftentimes when people go into survival mode, preppers and these sorts of people. They miss the reality that it is, again, it's a fundamental law of economics. If on average we produce more than we consume, the world gets richer. If on average we consume more than we produce, the world gets poorer. And that is going to be true of the world no matter what situation we're in. That is still true in a post-apocalyptic zombie-filled world. Productivity still matters. Under any scenario, productivity matters. And productivity comes from the division of labor, and from specialization, and from economies of scale. And that comes from being a part of a community, from being a part of a group of people. All right. So that's about as deep as I can go on community. That's actually deeper than I meant to go today. So thank you for bearing with me on that. But it's such a crucial thing. So you need to be thinking about the value that you bring, the skills and equipment that you bring, and complementing rather than competing with others in your community, plugging gaps within your community. So that you have value that you can exchange in return for value. It doesn't necessarily have to be money, but sorry, I should have said that differently earlier. It doesn't necessarily have to be money, but it should always be value for value, right? It can be barter, it can be whatever you want it to be, but there has to be an exchange of value as often as possible. Otherwise, you're missing half the conversation and you don't really know if what you're doing is valuable. All right, so the course itself is going to contain other people that are doing the course. So this is, of course, the masterclass that's coming up starting on Wednesday of next week. It is going to contain others that are serious about building community. So if you don't feel like you've got a lot of community, perhaps doing the course might actually be a really valuable thing, just to meet a bunch of others that are serious-minded about building community. Okay, moving on to the final of the 6 weeks, the next steps. And again, I'm going to be blasting through this really, really quickly. We've talked about focus, we've talked about hope, we've talked about courage, we've talked about faith, we've talked about community, and now we're going to talk about next steps. But very quickly, I'm going to touch on each of those topics again and sort of recap where we're at and where we will be in the masterclass by the time these 6 weeks are done. So firstly, focus. Consider a typical day or a typical week. Are you running out of time or energy for the important things because you're wasting it and it's being consumed by distractions and things that you can't actually change or influence? That's focus. 2, hope. Are you listening to the Black Pill Brigade? Are you allowing yourself to be influenced by them? Or are you allowing to hope for unrealistic things that are just simply never going to come true, and you're wasting your energy on things that you really don't have a lot of influence or control over? Bring your focus to the things that you can control, and bring your hopes into line with reality, and into line again with the things that you can control, so that when you hope for something, it then inspires you to work hard for it so that you can actually accomplish something. All right, so then courage. Courage does not exist. Courage comes from seeing your values being violated and having an identity that will not allow you to turn a blind eye. That's what courage actually is in the moral sense. Moral courage is about knowing what your values are and recognizing when they're being violated, and then having an identity that requires you to do something about it. That is where courage comes from. Do you know what your values are? Can you articulate them? Do you know where they came from and why you've arrived at them? Could you argue for them if you were having a debate with someone? I think it's a pretty fundamental thing. Would you recognize when they're being violated and why? Could you articulate and explain to someone else who doesn't see it what it is that you see? And does your identity require you to then act? Because the worst possible place that you could be is to have values, to know what they are, to recognize when they're being violated, and to have an identity that allows you to run away and be a coward and have to live with that for the rest of your life. That is the worst possible situation to be in. You need to know what your values are. You need to recognize when they're being violated. Then you need to have the kind of identity that requires you to act. And that is when you will discover courage that you never thought you had. Faith. Faith is a wonderful source of values and identity. Obviously, from my perspective, I believe Christ is king. I'm becoming more and more overt about that publicly. Obviously, I've believed that, for a long time privately, and I've never shied away from acknowledging it. But I'm becoming more overt about that. But even if you don't believe that, finding your faith in your fellow man, the freedoms that you inherited at birth, are a great example that people can actually be trusted. They gave that to you. You didn't even have to work for it. You just got born into it. Faith in the invisible hand, and faith and faithfulness, a commitment to your own faithfulness, to just persevere and do what's right and leave that legacy behind you for the next generation. Those things will help you to sleep better at night, regardless of what's going on in the world around you. And then resilience through community. So resilience being a key word here. And this, I didn't quite touch on this when I was talking about community earlier. The value of community fundamentally is it's very easy to have something go wrong when you're on your own, when you're isolated, and to not be able to recover from that. That's a very, very easy thing. When you have a community around you that will pick you up when you're the one that stumbles, and where you are committed to helping pick up others when they're the ones that stumble, that's an incredibly powerful thing, and we all need that in our life. And I've experienced that this year, people getting around me in an amazing way. So community, resilience through community. Do you have a community? Do you know what you're looking for? Do you know what someone would need who someone would need to be in order for you to go, oh, I'm going to invest some time and some energy and cultivate community with you. Get to the point where I know you, you know me, you know that you can rely on me in a pinch, and I know that I can rely on you in a pinch. That's what a community is. Do you know how to get there? Do you have anything to offer? What's the thing of value? The knowledge, the skills, the equipment, the resources in some sense. What do you have to offer that community? And do the people that you think of, when you think of, do I have a community? If I were to ask that question to the people that you're thinking of, would they think of you? Is it reciprocal? Because it needs to be. It needs to be reciprocal. Otherwise, it just doesn't quite work. Do you know how to communicate with each other? How to reach each other at a pinch? Remember, not when everything's fine and everything's going well. Do you know how to communicate with each other, how to get to each other, and how to support each other when things are going wrong? Because that's when the community is actually going to matter. And again, there's a bunch of different scenarios you could war game as to what might be going wrong. But and I'll leave that to you to pick. I don't have time tonight to talk about that. I will in the masterclass. So, final thought on this, in terms of next steps, is to think about your own individual resilience. Because your own individual resilience, your capacity to have something go wrong in your life for whatever reason, really bad storm, really bad government, getting retrenched at work, sudden sickness, pick your poison, pick the thing that goes wrong. Your ability to withstand that hit and not have to compromise on your values or your identity is really, really important. And that is where the resilience of your community will come from. If you have a community full of lots of people that are individually resilient and committed to helping each other when someone cops a hit, then you end up with a community that is incredibly resilient. So what am I talking about when I talk about resilience? Those of you that have been following me for a while will remember that early in COVID, when I started doing my first slow chats, one of the very earliest ones was called Signs of the Times and Things to Think About. And I specifically talked about the specific logistical areas that we all need to be thinking about when it comes to being ready to cop a hit, when it comes to being ready to have something go wrong in our life. And I talked about the idea of a survive in place. And the example I used was a storm in Texas that took the grid down for up to 7 days, depending on where in Texas you live. There was a winter storm. And in some parts of Texas, they were without electricity for 7 days. There were more than 700 excess deaths in the state of Texas during that week. Most of them because people were not prepared. They ran out of water because all the pipes froze and the taps stopped working. Electricity was down. People died of CO2 poisoning because they brought barbecues in from outside. Barbecue gas is not the same as natural gas in your home. If you burn a barbecue inside, you are going to kill yourself. You're going to poison yourself with carbon dioxide. People didn't know that. They didn't have preparation to warm themselves any other way. And so they ended up just literally accidentally gassing themselves to death. People died in car crashes because they ran out of food or they didn't have medicine or the basic needs. They couldn't survive in place for 7 days without inputs coming into their home, electricity, gas, water, etc., food, shopping trips. They needed that. And unfortunately, for over 700 people, one storm was all it took to then end their lives. So with that in mind, slightly morbid, I know, but with that in mind, thinking about resilience. Now, it might not be a storm. It might be an attempt by government to shut down all your bank accounts because you're guilty of a thought crime of some sort. It might think about the Canadian truckers, right? The truckers themselves got targeted, and then people that financially supported the truckers got targeted. It might be something like that. It might be something where you show up to a protest in Canberra and find yourself burned all over and you can't work for a month. It could be any one of a lot of different scenarios. I'm not prescribing what the scenario is, but in almost every scenario, the longer you can simply survive in place, the greater your resilience will be, the more options you will have, and the less pressure you will feel. Think about that police officer that featured in Battleground Melbourne, where a protester with balls of steel confronted him. And the officer was saying, hey, go home, stop protesting, or we'll arrest you. We don't want to arrest you, but we will. And he says, well, if you don't want to do it, don't do it. And the cop says, oh, well, I have to do it. My wife's lost her job, and this is the only thing I'm qualified, skilled to do, blah, blah, blah. What he's saying is he has no resilience. His conscience, he's one of those people, his values are being violated and he can feel it, he knows it, but his identity doesn't require him to do the right thing. His identity is allowing him to weasel out of that and spend the rest of his life with a guilty conscience, knowing that his values were violated and he didn't do anything about it. But the catalyst, or not the catalyst, the leverage that the state had over him to make him compromise was that his circumstances lacked resilience. He couldn't afford not to have his job for however long before he found another job. He wasn't in a situation where he felt he had options. So one of the most important and urgent next steps is for each of us individually to put ourselves in a place where we feel we have options, where we feel that we have at least a little bit of confidence, a little bit of resilience. And then when you put yourself and a bunch of other people who have done the same thing, individual resilience, you put those people together in a community, then when the government comes for one of you and they've got individual resilience and a community of resilient people that immediately rally around them, well, now all of a sudden we've got people who can stand up for their values and whose identity can be one of saying no to the government when they know that the government is wrong, and standing up for what's right no matter what the cost is, because they've got that resilience around them. All right, so let me be more specific before I wrap this up. Having a think about that storm scenario, let's just go back to that particular scenario. The idea that you have to be able to survive in place in the borders of your property, potentially within the walls of your home in a case of a severe winter storm, without any inputs. No water coming in, no sewage going out, no electricity, no gas, no food and shopping trips, no resupply of toilet paper, nothing. Whatever you have on your property right now, just think about it, like you're probably sitting at home. Whatever you have on your property right now, do you have what you need for a 7-day survive in place, to be resilient for 7 days? Okay, so here are the key topics. Water. If the tap stopped running, do you have enough water to drink? That's drinkable water, safe to drink. Can you access it without any electricity? Does it require a pump? Does it require being pushed through a filter that requires pressure that may not be there in the event that the mains fail? Sanitation. More people died in World War I from sanitary issues than from enemy bullets. This is things like, where does your poop go if your toilet is no longer refilling itself? You get one flush and then the cistern's empty. You don't want to go pouring your drinking water down the toilet. What are you doing for sanitation at that point in time? Clothes washing, things like this. Medicine. If you can't duck down to the chemist because someone started running a fever or what have you, do you have a small stockpile on hand of the more necessary, the more urgent things, the sorts of things that you might need? Basic first aid and the knowledge of how to actually use it if you're not in a position where you can leave the property and get to a hospital if someone falls over and breaks their wrist. Heating, big one if you live in a climate that is in any way prone to cold weather, and even if it's not common, if it happens at all, heating is a big one. A lot of the people that died in Texas died because they lacked heating, or they lacked a way of heating safely. They burnt their house down, they killed themselves with carbon dioxide, whatever the case may be. Energy. One of the things that a lot of people don't think about necessarily is they say, oh yeah, I've got big tubs of water. I've got a water tank at the back of the house, which is gravity fed. There's a tap on the tank. We can just gravity feed the water out. And we've got lots of rice and lots of pasta stockpiled. So we're good. Do you have the energy to cook that rice, to heat that water, to cook the pasta? Do you have the energy? Oh, I've got a freezer full of food. We'll be right for a year. Well, what if that freezer's not working? What if the electricity for the freezer isn't there? Do you have energy? And have you thought through these other things that you think you have? Have you thought through their entire life cycle to get them from whatever condition you're storing them in to the condition you need them to be in order to eat? All right. Now, some people are saying firewood and that sort of stuff. Absolutely, if you've got access to it. All right. Not everybody does. And one of the things to think about is if you live in I used to live in a high-rise apartment building in Fitzroy in Melbourne's inner northern suburbs. I used the local coals like it was my pantry. I went there, once, sometimes even twice a day. That's all well and good for the trendy urban inner city dweller. But the minute something goes wrong, you've got no resilience. And I wasn't thinking about these things back then. This is before I was married. I didn't have kids. I didn't have dependents. And I just wasn't thinking about the world in this way. But now I look back and I go, there's actually a lot of people that live like that. And the moment there's an interruption to the food supply, the moment there's any kind of a disruption at all, they are going to find themselves within hours or certainly within a day or two, not able to survive in place, not able to stay inside their own property. So that's energy. Food, that's obviously pretty self-explanatory. That's where carbs can be good. I'm on a low carb diet at the moment, but in terms of storage, you can't really go past some carbs. Carbs contain energy. They'll give you the fuel to be able to do whatever you need to do, and they can store and sit for a long time. But beans are also good. Certain types of meats that have been treated in the right ways can survive for a really long time. Do you perhaps have chickens or other things that you can actually keep on a suburban block, or maybe you've got some land? Whatever the case may be for you, have you thought about food? But here's the next problem. Think about all of those topics and think about the fact that your neighbors don't have those things. Think about the scenario that we're envisioning here. A big coronal mass ejection takes down the grid, okay, or a big storm or a big whatever it may be. It's all very well that you've got energy and you can cook, but what if your neighbors smell what you're cooking? You remember how feral people got within days just because they thought they weren't going to get toilet paper? Can you imagine what happens if people are thirsty or watching their kids get thirsty or get sick from bad water, or kids are complaining that they're hungry? Every civilization is 3 square meals away from revolution. It's a maxim from, ancient history. If your entire populace misses 3 meals in a row, that's it. You've got a revolution on your hands. If a winter storm comes and all of a sudden people are missing meals, and then the smell of your barbecue goes wafting over their fence, you might find that your nice neighbors are a little less nice than what they are to you normally. So you've got to think about secrecy. How do you have all of these things, but not let the people that are a threat to you know that you have it? And people say, oh, well, I've got guns, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay, good luck. I hope never to find myself in a situation like that, right? I hope never to find myself in a situation where I'm having to contemplate using lethal force on someone who just wants to feed their kids. That's a horrible situation for them and a horrible situation for you. So secrecy is better, but community is essential. And so this is where you need to pick and choose. You need to build that community. those people that know who you are, where you are, you trust them, they trust you. And this is why it's so important that every member within the community is actually pulling their weight. Because if they know that you've got all these things and there's a bunch of members in the community that haven't actually pulled their weight and made any preparations themselves, then the minute the shit hits the fan, they become your enemy. They become the people that are coming to you not out of mutual support, but out of dependency. They're going to consume your resources and or fight you for your resources, depending on the particulars of the situation. So as you build your community, weed out the people that are going to be like the communists and just be dependents versus the people that are actually pulling their weight. The people that you would be able to depend on are the people that you will allow to depend on you. The people that aren't dependable themselves, you cannot afford to allow them to become dependents on you, because they will become a threat to the very family, to your family, and to the very preparations that you've made. So that's my thoughts on next steps. And that resilience isn't just about being a prepper and disaster preparation, etc. It gives you the headspace to be able to follow your conscience when you're required. Like, think about me back when I was living in a high-rise apartment building in Fitzroy. I had hardly any food in my pantry. My fridge was empty most of the time. I used the local Coles like it was my pantry. I'm dependent on power to pump my water up. I mean, if there's a power outage, everything's gone. Everything's absolutely gone. And think about that level of dependency. Now, if the government threatened me with confiscating money out of my bank account or shutting down my electricity or my water or these sorts of things, that's a really visceral threat, because that's going to affect me now. That's going to affect me within minutes, within hours. I'm going to be starting to have some issues because of whatever's happened. But if you're, to make an extreme contrast, if you're on a couple of 100 acres and you're self-sufficient and you're off-grid and you've got your own water and you've got your own power and you've got your chickens and your cows and everything else, and the government makes the same threat, we're going to cut off your power or water. Well, I don't even use it. We're going to confiscate all the money in your bank account. Okay. You're still going to eat. You've still got water. Your kids are still going to be, clothed and fed. And the threat is not as visceral. It's not as immediate. And you can sit there and go, right, I've got 30 days or I've got indefinite survival here. I've got a community around me that I know are going to look after me. I'm going to take some time to think about my options. And that threat doesn't have that visceral effect on you. And under those circumstances, you are going to be much more likely to make better decisions and to follow your conscience and to obey your conscience under those circumstances. And that's really what this comes down to in the end. All right. So water, sanitation, medicine, heating, energy, food, secrecy, and integration with that community that we mentioned before. Those are the next steps. To have a think about that. Put yourself in a position where you have individual resilience and work towards being a part of a community where everyone has individual resilience, and you'll find yourself in a much better place. All right. So this has been an overview of the Getting Your Head in the Game Masterclass. This is my effort to begin to cultivate a deeper relationship with you guys, part of my community. And I know a lot of you guys feel like you know me, but to be honest, I don't know most of you, and this is an opportunity for me to get to know a bunch of you a lot better. So for those of you that do join the masterclass, obviously we're going to spend a lot of time. We're going to do lots of Q&A, and I'm really trusting that this is actually going to be the beginning of something much bigger and something really beautiful over the long term. But also we're going to go a lot deeper into each of these topics. I mean, if this is what I've just done now in, an hour and a half. So each week is going to be at least a half an hour of me diving deeper into that individual topic, followed by at least an hour of Q&A, where you guys get to pick my brain, suggest things that I've missed or what have you. We get to work on each other and help each other to be able to really go deep into these topics and really start to get some really good perspective on these things, that to help us to get our head in the game, to give us perspective, to get us to the place where we can make better decisions and navigate some of the really challenging times that are coming our way. So if you want to be a part of the community that will grow out of this course, then can I really urge you to join, urge you to sign up. I'll just grab the link again and post that again for those that missed it the last couple of times I've posted it. All right, I'm just posting that now, so that will show up into Facebook comments, and it'll also show up into YouTube comments. So I don't plan to do this as a live course a second time. I plan to do this one time as a live course, and that's this, starting on Wednesday. The replays will be available, so everyone that joins the course will be able to watch the replays. If you miss a Wednesday, if we can't be there on the Wednesday night, whatever, it will be available as a replay, but obviously the Q&A is live, so you will have missed that. But I don't plan to do this live again. I'm planning to do this once. And then at some point in the future, I'll probably make it available as just a fully pre-recorded thing where people won't get to participate in the Q&A and won't really be a part of that community aspect of it. But the point is, I need to get this out of my head, and I want to get this out there into the community. And this is a way for you to be able to begin to form that community with me, and also a way for me to be able to pay my bills while I do what I do. Being completely blunt, that is definitely a part of why I've pivoted into this. Those of you that follow my work, you would have heard my slow chat with Craig Kelly, where I talked about the decision that I'm having to make at the moment. Do I keep doing what I do, or do I go and get a job that actually pays me well? Because what I've come to realize is where I thought, oh, I'm doing all these great things for free for other people and really helping other people. What I have come to understand this year is just how much that's cost my family. And as I look, for example, at these resilience metrics, and I think about our own resilience situation, we need to spend some money in order to get into a position where we can be resilient at that individual level. And if I wasn't being Topher and I was just going and working a job, we would have that money to spend. We would be in a much better position ourselves. But because of what I do, we haven't been in a position to actually do any of that. And I don't say that as a complaint. I love what I do. I'm proud of what I do. And I love this. I love these moments. But it has come at a cost to my family. And so that's what this is about from my perspective, is building that community, sharing this knowledge and understanding, but also giving back to my own family some of what I've cost them over the years by doing what I do. So there won't be any more lives. The replay will be available to everyone that joins for the live. So whether you can make each individual one live or not, it will be available to you as a replay. I do plan to do other masterclasses in the future. I want to do an economics for dummies, which is not going to be talking about like shares and inverted yields on government bonds and all that kind of nonsense. Not that kind of economics, just about how money works and how people work and how value works, etc. So that I will do probably next year, I believe. And I suspect I may end up kind of formalizing this Survive in Place program, kind of like Boy Scouts for grown-ups, where you can, anyway, I'm toying with a few ideas there, but that's probably all next year. So really, if you want to be a part of something like this with me, then this is it. This is the opportunity. So go to the link, sign up, and I'll see you there. So starting on Wednesday the 14th, we are covering focus, hope, courage, faith, community, and next steps. And so you guys hopefully will get, I'm confident you'll get an enormous amount of value out of it. These are all topics that I have discussed publicly before, and I've had a lot of feedback and Q&A afterwards. So other people have already refined the material that I'll be presenting, and then you guys will get the chance to ask questions and all of that afterwards as well. So thank you. Thank you for watching. There's nearly 700 people between all the different platforms, between X, YouTube, and Facebook. There's nearly 700 people watching right now. So thank you so much. There's been hundreds upon hundreds of comments and 279 reactions, it turns out, as well. So thank you. I really do appreciate your time and spending this with me. I hope you got value. I always aim to provide value. I'm very mindful of the privilege of being able to sit here and talk to you. So I do hope that tonight, even though I've skimmed very quickly through these topics, and we will be diving so much deeper into each one of them, there's entire aspects of each of these topics that I just had to leave out for the sake of time today. But I do hope you still got value. I hope that it has helped you to be a bit more optimistic. It's helped you to maybe get your head into the game a little bit more, and you've got a sample of what it is that this course is all about, despite me having to go so quickly. If you choose not to join, if you choose not to participate in the masterclass, then please go with my blessing. All right, please take whatever you've gotten out of tonight, run with it, encourage other people, share it with people, etc. And thank you for being here. I really just appreciate your eyeballs and your time tonight. And please also continue to enjoy the podcast. That'll always be free. Come to the speaking events. I don't charge an entry fee. Sometimes the organizer has to pay for the venue, but I don't get paid to speak. I travel to all these places at my own cost, usually paying for my own accommodation as well. And just trying to make that back out of books and merch and that sort of stuff. But I don't charge any fees to talk. So if you don't want to spend money, that's fine. Come and see me live. You don't have to pay a cent. But if you do join, then number one, thank you for supporting me financially and helping me to continue to give away all of the other work that I do. And also, thank you. And I can't wait to spend 6 weeks with you going so much deeper into each of these topics: focus, hope, courage, faith, community, and then next steps, resilience, how you put yourself in a position where you can obey your conscience when that time comes, when the next test comes. And I look forward to with you building a community. And I don't know what will grow out of it. I have a sneaking suspicion it'll be quite substantial. I have a sneaking suspicion that this is the beginning of something actually really big that will continue with me for as long as I continue to do what it is that I do. I don't know. I don't know, but I have a sneaking suspicion this is actually going to prove to be a really significant moment. So for those of you that do decide to join, the numbers are limited, so please click on the link and jump in and make that happen ASAP so you don't miss out. But I think we together can begin to build a new community of people that are really focused on getting their head in the game, that understand how to build a community and what makes a community work and tick, and is committed to working out the bugs. I'm not perfect. I don't have it all figured out, but is committed to working out the bugs and working through that and really building something beautiful where we can all have resilience, we can all have community, and that means that we can all do the right thing when our conscience requires us to do it. And that'll be a good thing for all of our sakes. So thank you so much for watching. And so many really positive comments. I really appreciate it from Susie, from Ross, from Dale, from Ginger Lou, from Hannah, and Fallout 3, whatever your name is. Thank you. I appreciate the encouragement. Endmity is just saying they've signed up. So thank you. I really appreciate that. And my phone's been buzzing, so I know a lot of people are. So places are limited. If this is of interest to you, please click the link. Ross has just reposted the link there. Please click the link. I will send out an email maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow to everyone that's on my email list, and that'll have the link in it as well if you've missed it. But look, I really, really, really hope you got value out of tonight. Whether you sign up or not, I hope that tonight has been helpful. I hope that tonight has been encouraging. I hope that tonight has helped you to get your head into the game. And for those that do choose to join, thank you in advance, and I will see you on Wednesday. And in any case, whether you join or not, there will be more podcasts coming up. I haven't decided if I'm doing one next week or not, but there will be one coming up at a minimum with Andrew Lowenthal of Australian. He was one of the guys who worked on the Australian Twitter files. So look forward to that when that time comes. All right, guys, thank you so much. Until next time, cheers.